everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. In this episode, we delve into the familiar yet mysterious topic of Ouija boards. Are they merely innocent games, or do they possess an eerie power to connect us with forces beyond our comprehension, serving as gateways to the spirit realm? Whether you really believe in their purpose or not, the possibility that these boards have the ability to attract otherworldly energies, drawing them into the places we use them, sometimes the very places we call home. It can all be rather unsettling, and likely a main reason people choose to avoid them. But we can't all be so responsible all the time. That proves true in many ways. Stories of narrowly escaping something dangerous, something fatal, a situation you shouldn't have been in or one you had no control over. Encounters with vengeful spirits or heart-stopping moments with horrible humans. These stories will stay with you, just ordinary individuals thrust into extraordinary situations. So, let's get started, shall we? Once upon a time, when I was young and dumb and extremely drunk, my college dorm mates and I decided to make a Ouija board and contact the spirits that we suspected lived in our large old dorm building. We had heard stories, which turned out to be true, that our dorm had been many things before the city sold the building to our school for next to nothing because no one else wanted it. The stories went like this. Our school had been an old TB hospital originally. This story was bolstered by the fact that we had a crematorium in the basement, complete with 2 large, dark, people-cooking ovens. This door was always locked, but we'd gotten in there to view this macabre wonder several times. Supposedly, there was a nurse who had worked at the hospital, whose husband had left her for a woman he'd met during the war, and so she hated men. This will become relevant later. We found a gurney in some back room. It was old and completely made of metal. The kind of thing that could have easily transported the dead from anywhere to that cold crematorium. The last thing that the building had been before the school gained possession was a not-so-nice brothel. Rumor had it that a prostitute had been slain by her pimp in the creepy elevator, one that was so dangerous it had to be drywalled up long ago. There was supposed to be blood splatter still on the walls. Throughout the place, walls were where they weren't supposed to be, added for convenience and space over time. The basement, which was a series of small rooms, had once been one big room, with only the crematorium as an extra body storage. The nursing station was on the 2nd floor, and those rooms were safer. Rocking chairs rocked, posters stared, etc. We decided to contact the spirits of the dead the hard, drunk way. No store-bought Ouija board for us. We got a large piece of wood that was cut into a square, and we cut our hands like lunatics and drew the letters in blood. Then we used a convenient shot glass for the planchette and got about the business of contacting the dead. It moved, of course, and everybody blamed everyone else. I was drunk scared, though, which translates to absolutely terrified. We talked to a little boy first, who wouldn't tell us his name, and seemed almost as scared as I was of something. He kept saying that he shouldn't talk to us because 9 was coming. We laughed, accused each other of messing around with the thing, and kept going, because you're chicken shit if you don't, right? Eventually, 9 showed up, and I don't remember a whole lot about what that thing said, but I do remember that it hated on this one guy in our group so much that it was noticeable it didn't appreciate his presence. He was super cute and went through girls like people go through tissues when they have a bad cold. We disbanded our little ouija experiment soon after that, going our separate ways to our separate rooms. That night, that guy, the one that 9 was hating on, had a nightmare. It was loud enough to wake us all. He said that thing visited him in the night. It claimed they were watching him and were disgusted by him, going as far as choking him to the point that he thought he was going to die. She was wearing a nurse's uniform. Back in the 90s, when I was married, my wife and I experimented with Ouija boards and other things for a while, which I don't recommend. I think the lure of curiosity can lead to trouble. Weird occurrences can both terrify and stimulate more curiosity. Once during this period, my then wife was on the couch watching TV in the living room one evening. There was light from the kitchen and a hallway by the front door, and from the TV. The living room was dimly lit. I stood near a set of bookshelves where the TV was, by the short hallway that led to the front door. I noticed a shadow near my wife on the wall behind the couch. It moved slowly along the wall, just behind her and towards the window. I asked her if she saw it too, and she said that she did. We both watched as it moved steadily along the wall, past the window, and down along behind the couch, and then beyond that, into a dark corner. It then moved over the wooden bookshelves, and I could hear some subtle cracks and pops in the wood of the shelves as it passed over them. It went directly past where I stood, and around the corner in the hallway. The hall light flared brighter as it passed. Then, it moved to the closed front door and seemed to be gone. Realistically, I don't believe that there's any explaining it away. Nothing was moving by a light source to cause it, and it moved independently. So I've got a question for the men out there. And I just emphasize men because I don't want comments from little boys or giga-chads. Just good old-fashioned real answers. Let's say you're dating a lady who's independently middle class, owns her own home from a recent settlement that went in her favor, and she's smoking hot. But her house might be haunted. Is that a deal breaker? Over the years, after my first marriage dissolved, we were married young, I've only seriously dated a few men off and on, all ending after they'd visit and spend time here. My first husband was a writer. We purchased our house in 2013. It's a few hours to get anywhere from any direction. Originally, the isolation was preferable over our flat in Queens. It was less than a month after moving our stuff into the house when activity started. Disembodied footsteps walking through the wooden halls while both of us would be sitting downstairs. Doors would open and close on every floor, not simultaneously, but it's as if they were living alongside us, going about their days and nights as we did ours. The radio and other electronics have turned on randomly. The radio specifically, though, has turned on at 2 different times when the station was playing a certain song. Both times the radio turned on, it was while the house was mostly quiet, so each time it happened, my attention honed in on it. Neither of us had a problem with it, though. We embraced it a little by naming the spirits. Because this house is old as fuck, we named them Ethel and Jim. It feels like there's 2 of them living here. Sometimes the female voice we dubbed Ethel would whisper in the kitchen and open the cupboards, but the heavy footsteps we believed to be from the one we named Jim. Since the divorce, I've continued my coexistence with them in harmony. All in all, however, these happenings are rare and genuinely insignificant to daily living. Listing the occurrences bunched all together like this makes it sound like I'm living in a carnival funhouse. I'm not, I promise. The spirits and I do not communicate. In all honesty, I did try once though, and I really didn't like the way it made me feel. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but if I'm going to attempt to enlighten, I need to be outright with my experience, if only to ward off the men from the boys. I was once leaned up against the wall of the dining room reading a book. On the wall next to me, I hear a soft bump bump. For reasons unknown, I'm compelled to make a fist and replicate the bump bump pattern back on the wall. As soon as I do, it's like the vibrations of the room shook with panic. Dread instantly filled my chest. It felt as if I'd broken something. I became paranoid and swore that I heard footsteps leave the area I was in, like I'd scared them. I decided never to try that again. If you've reached this point, congratulations. You've lasted longer than a few of my most recent relationships. But for reals, aside from me being this hilarious, my question to the men, do you see all of this and think red flags? Should I just start acting just as surprised as them when shit happens? Like I haven't already named these ghosts? Honestly, I'm not a witch who lives in the forest. If you can assist me on these questions, I'd be forever grateful. Bonus if you know a potential suitor in the lower state of Jefferson, known as Northern California and Southern Oregon. Please send him this for me. And thanks to anyone else who read this too. I used to hang out with these sisters named Hannah and Laura. We couldn't go anywhere without them stealing something, spitting on something, or offending someone in some way or another. Way before clout and viral status could be acquired, these two were harassing people purely for their own enjoyment. Couple of devious bitches, honestly. Our dads worked construction together, and the three of us grew up together. I guess my upbringing was slightly better than theirs because I never got into their hijinks. I had a conscience, and they were morally bankrupt at 11. I think their mom drank while she was pregnant. Laura had beady little eyes and a thin upper lip. A telltale sign that she was swimming in booze, even after her mom knew that she had 2 buns in the oven. A quarter of the prison population has fetal alcohol syndrome. I'm not saying anyone diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome is prone to impulsive aggression in any way, but in this case, yeah, it was probably a contributing factor. The 3 of us were walking home from the mini-mart one night when a big truck pulls up beside us on the road. It's a man in his 30s, clean-shaven, wearing a Houston Oilers hat. He leans through his car to talk out the passenger side window, asking us if we need a ride home. We don't slow down, just keep walking. He asks again. Hannah's walking closest to the street, and without warning, she grabs onto the man's passenger side mirror, lifting her whole body weight on the thing, and yanks it off, calling him a pedophile in the process. The guy starts losing his shit and throws his truck into park. The 3 of us start running as fast as we could, but our 11-year-old legs couldn't outpace his, and he was quickly on our tail. He catches Hannah and begins dragging her back to his truck. She's kicking and screaming while he struggles to carry her back. Me and Laura stop and turn around to run and save Hannah. Both of us grab each of Hannah's legs and begin to play tug of war with her, but again, becoming easily overpowered. Then, like an angel's glow in the distance, a pair of headlights come over the horizon, heading our way. The highway we were walking on is a dark 4-lane highway with only a handful of lampposts on the sidewalk, leaving big gaps of black in between. We were close enough to one of the posts for me to attempt making myself visible to flag down the car. Laura starts jumping on the man, and both girls wrestle with him. The headlights I'm watching are coming up incredibly fast. When I get under the lamppost, I start waving my arms and jumping, trying to get their attention. But by the growing sound of its engine, I'm losing hope that it will see me in time to stop and help. Then I see the headlights slowly begin to swerve into the lane closest to us. Maybe they did see me. I keep jumping and waving like a lunatic. The headlights fully merge into our lane, but as the engine's roar approaches, I realize the car is going even faster than I thought, and it's not slowing down. It passes me, close enough to feel the wind against my body as it blows by like lightning. Then it was the blink of an eye before I heard the deafening sharp sound of metal bending. The sports car that passed me had flown straight into the back of the parked truck, going easily over 100 miles an hour. This gets the attention of everyone, including the man. No one is scuffling anymore, but as soon as the man sees what's happened to his truck, he's running in the direction of the flames. Anna actually goes to chase after the man, but Laura stops her. I was just standing there, in shock. Both girls are trying to break me out of this trance. I could hear their muffled voices, but more than anything, I could hear the crackling of the flames, and I could smell smoke. We needed to go find help, I thought. Finally, I snapped out of it when I saw that Hannah and Laura had already started running in the direction of home, not help. I watched as they ran past the accident and disappeared around the bend without me. This was 2000, so cell phones existed, but none of us had one. However, the man must have had one on his person, because I could see him holding something to his ear as he angrily paced back and forth. I either had to pass this horrific accident and follow those two jokers back home another 2 miles, or double back less than a mile to the mini-mart. I chose to run back to the mini-mart. They let me use their phone. As I told my parents what happened, I saw the store clerk take out his own cell phone and call 911. My parents came to pick me up, and on the way home, they actually stopped at the accident site, proceeded to drag a police officer over, where they made me explain everything in detail again. The police told my parents the driver of the sports car didn't make it, likely died on impact given the speeds they were traveling. The police were, however, still looking for the driver of the pickup truck. He was a wanted man, as they put it. I learned later that the man who originally stopped us was out on probation, had served time for some serious crimes against women and children. That day, though, he was wanted for murdering the owner of that truck he'd been driving. So, I guess he wasn't calling the police on his cell phone. Even at 11 years old, I knew I dodged some major bullets that day. Seaside Sanatorium, Waterford, Connecticut. Back in 2002, my friends and I did some old-fashioned trespassing that turned kinda terrifying. The building had been abandoned for 4 or 5 years by this point. We thought, let's bring some alcohol, some flashlights, and just see if this place was as scary as everyone ramped it up to be. Right when we got inside, it was obvious we weren't the first ones with this idea. Leftover alcohol, a makeshift Ouija board, some pentagrams, and other random shit that littered the floor. After messing with that stuff, we decided to explore in 2 groups, each on opposite ends of the building. When we regrouped, our flashlights, the ones with fresh batteries, started to flicker. While we were all standing together, discussing what happened, we discovered that what we were hearing couldn't have been each other. The whispers, they weren't us messing around. The obnoxious sounds of doors slamming. Then, while standing together discussing what had happened, we heard a door slam in the distance. With that, we ran, and in our hurry, leaving our own alcohol behind. Dear Mom Squad, I do seek advice, but I'm keeping this anonymous, for reasons I hope are obvious or at least understood. My daughter, who we'll call Allie, is about to turn 13. Yikes. A little over a month ago, she really started grilling me about how she managed to get a set of scars, 2 distinct lines stretching from her left shoulder to the middle of her neck, with no recollection of it. For years, whenever she'd look at them in the mirror and ask, I would remind her that she'd fallen off a horse and gotten a concussion when she was 6. Thankfully, the brush she tumbled into was easy on her bones, but the thorns weren't so nice to her skin. 7 years later, she's looking through a more investigative lens and starting to ask real questions while understanding the world around her. I do my best to answer truthfully. Recently, she asked, if I fell into thorn bushes and hit my head, why don't I have more scars on me? I say, guess you got lucky. However, she's right. The scars aren't from a horse accident. I'm sure there would have been more scars, but I've told the same story for so long, I can't change the narrative without fully coming clean. What is true, Allie was 6 when she received the long cuts down her shoulder to the middle of her neck, and she did sustain a very serious concussion during the incident. She had to receive over 30 stitches and almost bled out on the way to the hospital. Her eyes opened in the ambulance. Then, her heart stopped for a short amount of time. She was brought back to life at the hospital. Allie thinks that her memory loss was just a few days before and after the fall, but there wasn't really a fall. The real timeline was over 12 days before it all happened. Her memory wiped completely of it all. We feared that she was possessed. The sweet daughter I once had became violent and loud. Her eyes even changed colors. We're not a religious family. We don't give in to the whole angel-demon idea, but it was undeniable that something evil had gotten a hold of Allie's spirit, and it wouldn't let go for 12 long days. She refused to eat, and her organs began to shut down. Doctors couldn't help. On the verge of death, I was desperate and I hired a psychic. After meeting with my daughter, they strongly recommended contacting the church. Jesus seemed to be the collective word with anyone we asked. We had no other choice, no options. I called right after the psychic left, and after a brief conversation, members of the clergy were at my house early the next morning. Allie glared at the men as they walked into the bedroom. I'll never forget that look. It was almost as if the demon was punishing me for bringing them in. Allie produced a razor blade. She'd hidden it beneath her tongue. That's when she leaned back and started dragging it across her shoulder and up her neck, cutting herself. It took me and both of the pastors' strength to wrestle the blade from her hand, all of us getting cut in the process. She fights back with incredible strength. We get her arms and legs pinned, and I call 911. While the pastors are holding her down, she starts banging the back of her head off of the ground until she knocks herself unconscious. Her eyes opened in the ambulance, but they eventually closed after she was sedated. Allie would spend 3 days in a coma. When she woke up, the color of her eyes were back to normal. She was confused, and that's when I learned that her last memory was from over 12 days ago. At first she was scared, didn't know why she was hooked up to all the IVs. I quickly made up the story about the horse, and it seemed to work. She had horseback riding lessons every Tuesday, so it wasn't so far-fetched at the time. I didn't know what else to do. I still don't. I'm I'm afraid talking about it might stir everything up again. Is this something that I should tell my daughter? Would you? The priest didn't even have a chance to bless the place before emergency services were called. But I believe the demon left her body when her heart stopped. I don't want her to have to think about that. I don't want to tell her I don't know when she asks if it could happen again. What do I do? I guess when it comes down to it, what's going to traumatize my daughter less? Lying to her and possibly building a bridge of distrust in our communication, or the latter? I don't know. It really feels like a secret I could take to my grave. But Mom Squad, it takes a village, and I'm in need of guidance. Thank you. My first couple of years out of nursing school, I worked for a hospital near Pleasant Hill, Iowa. Rumors of the place being haunted circulated from the moment I started, but I was heavily focused on doing a good job and really tried to ignore the rumors. We started construction on the main wing of the hospital, probably halfway into my second year. During one of my shifts, I was walking through the construction area to get to the cafeteria. I saw a figure standing behind a section of long construction plastic hanging in front of me. I could hear him talking faintly. He seemed slightly distressed. Feeling kind of awkward, I moved the plastic to the side, fully prepared to excuse myself to the employee working. But there was nobody there. I quickly jumped back. The figure was gone. I skipped lunch that day. I flip houses for a living. In my most recent project, it's haunted. It sounds horrible, I know, but when you do this for a profession, you gotta go for the best deal. And that sad reality is, nothing sells cheaper than a murder house. By the time you change its appearance, the community has moved on, and you can sell for a mint. Obviously, the market and location are important, but we're not doing a masterclass here. My most recent purchase was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on half an acre's plot in a nice neighborhood. The inspection was favorable, so I never personally went inside until after closing. I've definitely started with much worse. Most of these upgrades will be purely cosmetic, which is pretty rare. The couple who previously owned the house had 2 girls, ages 4 and 8. The husband was leaving his wife for someone else, and she decided that he would never see the children again. Several neighbors heard their argument. It spilled into the front yard as she chased her husband to his truck, throwing picture frames as he fled. Shattered glass covered the driveway when it was over, and she went back inside without glancing at the small audience that had gathered. They'd lived in that house for 15 years, and everyone knew them well. No one expected what would happen next. It was during summer break, and the wife had a work-from-home job, so no one thought much of it when they didn't see her for a few days. Everyone assumed that she was just taking time to herself. It was 3 days later when the husband returned to find the bodies. The children were each in their beds, as if tucked in for the night, but the medical examiner ruled that they most likely died shortly after their father left. The youngest was drowned and moved to her bed, while the 8-year-old suffered multiple stab wounds that likely began while she was asleep. Afterwards, the wife put on her finest dress and jewelry. Then she took a lethal dose of her prescription medication. The whole community mourned their loss. Almost every house in the neighborhood had children who played with the 2 sisters. There's a park a few streets over where a memorial had been placed in their honor, and I see people stopping there regularly, even a year later. The story is indeed tragic. They all are. My heart goes out to the family's loved ones. But no matter how much bad juju is associated with a location, I've never experienced anything remotely paranormal or unusual. house is a clever arrangement of wood and nails that protects us from the elements, or so I thought. Now I don't know what to believe. A lot of clothes and random effects were left behind, so my first order of business was to box up everything for donation. Once I finished with all the other rooms, I moved on to the bedrooms. That's when shit started to get crazy. In the master bedroom, I was emptying a dresser when a small ring holder fell from the shelf and hit me in the back. Only it didn't seem like it just fell. It hit me weirdly hard for a short drop. Plus, I hadn't touched that shelf or even the wall. 5 minutes later, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I thought someone was in the house with me, but I searched every room without finding a soul. The second kid's room was colder than the rest of the house. I packed it quickly and hurried back to the master bedroom, but it was like the cold followed me. I opened the closet and began tossing everything into boxes, but then that door slammed on my hand. Before it could stop throbbing, a set of footsteps crossed the room right behind me. I felt a light breeze as they passed, but no one was there. I suddenly felt dizzy and sick to my stomach. For a minute, I thought I was going to puke, but then everything was just normal again. I felt fine. The room wasn't cold anymore. But then, there was a loud crash from the living room. The boxes I previously stacked were spilled onto the floor. As I cleaned the mess, one of the hallway doors began opening and slamming over and over. I've never loaded so much so fast into my truck. When I was finally backing out of the driveway, I saw a shadow standing in the window, watching me leave. There's nothing about this experience that I can explain. Now, I have to go back this weekend. I can't afford to hire someone for cleaning and cosmetic work, but I'm hoping to have a few friends come along. I really don't think I can go into that house alone again. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me tonight. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons, whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.